So how do you transplant your crops into the ground? Let's find out today. So as you can see, these are our tomatoes. We have 6 rows of tomatoes and 2 rows of cucumbers. And right now we're gonna transplant a row of basil in our last row. And you can see the transplants are doing great. These were transplanted probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And these are on drip irrigation, which works perfect for transplants and row crops like tomatoes and cucumbers because they don't really like to get wet. And if you want to check out my other video on that, I made another video on that, on how to set up your drip irrigation. You can check that out. I'll link that video. And yeah, transplanting is definitely beneficial, gives you a head start. And if you want to buy plants, you missed out on part of the season, you could also transplant. So let me show you how to get started. So you have your plants, you've either bought plants from the store and you're ready to transplant into the ground in your garden, or you started plants from seed and you're ready to get them into the garden now. One benefit of transplanting is that it gives you a head start on your season. So if it's cold out, you can start your plants inside as transplants and you can get ahead of the season like that. In Florida, we start them early in the shade, so it's cooler, so we can get good germination. And then we bring them out here, we slowly transition them into the heat and bring them out here into the transplant. So let me show you. So today we are transplanting basil. So you can see we have a whole tray of basil. And this whole tray should only take up 1 row because we're gonna transplant half on one side of the drip tape and half on the other side of the drip tape. And for our fertilizer, we are using dried chicken manure. We get chicken manure very cheap around here, so we like to use it for our low feeders, like our greens and our basil. We like to use an actual fertilizer mix for our tomatoes and cucumbers since they are heavy feeders and they're actually producing fruit. But for basil, you can get away with really good compost and maybe some chicken manure, maybe some really good compost that's actually rich. It's not just like dead compost, because all it really needs is nitrogen to grow. So let me show you how to get this basil into the ground. Okay, so we're here on our drip tape, and how we transplant is we transplant next to every drip emitter. So there's a drip emitter that is every foot, and it emits water out of it. And the soil here acts as a sponge. You can see how that soil's really nice and wet. And even over here, it's nice and wet. So it really sponges it up and acts as a big wick, especially with our sandy soil here in Florida. And we want to plant 1 plant over here and 1 plant over here next to each drip emitter. And this is for basil. If you wanted to do tomatoes or cucumbers, we do 1 every foot. So 1 next to every drip emitter. And then we prune them to keep them vertical and keep them straight up. That way we can get maximum production. And I'll make a video on that too, on how to prune your tomatoes and how to keep them nice and clean. So the first step is to locate where you want to transplant. And we use this little hoe pitchfork thing. I don't know what it's called exactly, but it's got a little hoe on it and then it's got a nice little pitchfork. So it works really good for transplanting. What we do is we just stick this in the ground here, pull back a little bit, make a little spot, and you don't have to dig too deep. A lot of people make the mistake of transplanting their crops very deep into the ground because they think that they will grow roots. But a lot of crops don't do that. Only a few do, like tomatoes. And even tomatoes, I've had a lot of issues with stem rot. If you transplant too deep into the ground, especially if you have a lot of wood chips or compost on it, it can really just rot your stem out and make your tomato fall over and die. So we don't like to really bury the stems at all, and we like to keep our crops off the ground anyway, so there's not soil splashing onto it. So dig your little hole here. Doesn't need to be very big. If you're using a bigger pot, obviously you want to dig it to be a little bit bigger than the shape of your pot. And then you want to grab some of your chicken manure over here, dried chicken manure. And we just do about a handful for every crop. And then we just mix it into the soil. And And then now we're ready to transplant. So let me show you how to do that. All right, so to get your plants out of your trays, you need to have a knife. I just use a plastic little knife or a pencil. It depends what the shape yours is, but mine are little slits, and I just use a knife to poke through the bottom, and then you will get your transplant right there, and you'll have a little plug here. And all you gotta do is take your plug and then just put it in the ground like this, and then just fill it in around, and make sure your soil is not, and all you gotta do is fill it in around, and make sure your soil is not burying that stem. As you can see, I'm leaving that stem sticking out, and I'm actually pressing down around to make sure the soil's not up on the stem. And there you go, you have your first basil transplanted. And we are gonna do this for every single foot of drip tape here, and we're gonna do it on the other side too. If you really wanna be efficient, you would go along and you would make all the holes, and you do all the fertilizer, and then you do all the transplants. I found that's just the quickest way to do it, instead of just like doing one at a time. I feel like it's easier for me to just be focused on one task and be dialed into that muscle memory and just do it really quick and do all the transplants. So now that we got this one basil in here, we're gonna do the rest of this row, and we'll show you what it looks like when we're done. All right, so now you can see that we're all done with our basil here. We just got our 2 rows transplanted, and we transplanted our basil every foot, and we put one on each side. This side is our mammoth basil, and this side is our Genovese basil. One more quick tip that you want to make sure you do after you transplant your basil is you want to make sure that you water your plants, because after that transplant, it's going to be stressful for the plants. It might be in transplant shock, and it really needs water, especially if it's sunny. If you can, it's probably best to do transplants either early in the morning or later in the evening, so the plants can kind of get a little bit time to rest, so they're not in the direct sun. Right now we had the transplant in the middle of the day, but it's okay because we have our drip irrigation up, so it's not going to stop anything. So if you like this content and you got some value out of it, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll definitely be doing more videos. We're getting our farm into full swing right now, so we're going to be making videos on everything that we do on the farm, so be sure to stay tuned for that. All right, thanks guys.